in coaching over 6,000 real estate agents, there's one thing that I still see to this day that really gets in the way from an agent really reaching their highest level of success. We call it the disease of knowledge. And so, Ben, I really want to walk people through this because whether we're coaching an agent or not, I think that so many struggle with this and they just don't know it. And so the goal of today's episode is to raise an agent's awareness around this major problem so that once the behavior can be recognized, now we can do something about it. And so let me just give the audience a high level understanding of what the disease of knowledge is, and then we'll break down kind of the next part of this thing. All right. So the disease of knowledge is this problem that most real estate people have, in that their belief is that they're not where they want to be because they've made up a story in their mind that they don't know how to do something. And as a result of that belief, they spend their time, money, energy, effort seeking every bit of information under the sun, thinking that their success is somewhere hidden in this information. Because what ends up happening and what the disease of knowledge is okay, well, if that was the thing standing in the way of you succeeding after you've gotten the information that you thought you didn't have, the person says, well, that seems too easy. It can't be that thing. And then they're off chasing the next bit of information. They buy another course. They hire another coach. They go to another seminar. They opt into another email list. They watch another webinar, et cetera, et cetera. They're searching for the information that they think that they lack. And so they almost trick themselves into believing that obtaining information and learning new things is being productive, when there's a big difference between understanding something intellectually and then being able to execute it emotionally. Because it's real simple to go through a course, go through a seminar, understand what someone's doing to succeed intellectually, say, okay, I totally get it, makes total sense, I get exactly how to do this thing, and the person still doesn't do it. For years and years and years and years, it's like, people are like, well, what do I say? And what's the script? And yada, yada. And then I tell them exactly what to do, exactly what to say, and they still don't do it. Well, what's the disconnect? It's exactly what I just said, which is we trick our minds into believing, okay, once I know how to do this thing, I'm going to go out there and be able to win. But they don't have the emotional discipline or the emotional intelligence to actually execute on the thing that they're learning. They learn the script, but as soon as they go to make phone calls, emotion takes over. Fear, insecurity, doubt, etc. And they just can't execute. So that's an understanding of what we're going to talk about. What do you want to add to that? And then we'll dive into this thing.
It's, well, let's just dive in because I'm going to get way ahead of myself. I think you nailed it. I mean, that was just I was sitting in the bleachers for a minute, just taking it all in, and it's a curse. It happens to us all.
Yeah. And I think that's it does happen to us all. And so for years and years and years, especially when I work with an agent on a deeper level, I try to get them to understand, and it takes them a long time for them to grasp this. And that is that the learning is in the doing. That's and right. This same thing happens with that. When I explain the concept of learning is in the doing, intellectually, the person says, yep, I totally get it. I totally understand. And it's not until months and 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 months of me working with an agent and me coaching an agent and me holding an agent accountable, do they understand what that actually means. And here's what it means. You see this all the time too. We work with an agent, and typically we work with an agent for a couple of years, and they consume so much information. It's like drinking from a fire hose. They're so excited. because of all the new stuff that they're learning. And oftentimes we try to coach them to say, wait a minute, you're consuming too much information. And so we've restructured the way in which we work with an agent such that now it's like, well, you're actually going to execute one thing at a time, because all of us are on like information overload with all the content out there and all the information out there. It's like our brains are on overdrive. It's like information everywhere, but no one's doing anything about it. No one's actually executing on it. And so it's not until somebody actually goes out there and applies the information in the real world does the actual learning process takes place. That's the point. Intellectually, you get it. You understand, okay, the script says to say A, B, and C. And if I were to ask you, what do you say at the beginning of a listing presentation? I can get an agent to recite, I say A, B, and C. But then when they go sit their rear end in front of a real seller, a real prospect, a real consumer, and they try to deliver it, they freeze. They're filled with fear. They're filled with the insecurity. That's the difference between knowing something and being able to do something. And it's not until you start to do the thing do you actually learn any level of mastery. You know what I mean?
100%. You look at the military, right? They make you learn the rifle, right? I think this is an easy example. You learn the rifle, you learn all the parts, you understand it, like how it works. But then they do the whole drill, like middle of the night. You got to like disassemble and reassemble, blindfold it, right? They're trying to simulate these. We understand you know it, you get it, the textbook, you've even done it before and had a little bit of success. Now let's apply pressure so that it's instinctual. Because I think a lot of times we look at people, let's say somebody were to follow you, Brandon, and watch you do these scripts. They would even say, oh man, that's easy. I get this. This makes sense. I'm going to go do this. But then they go out there and they're like, holy cow, I forgot everything. I didn't do it. We resort to our lowest level of training, not
That's
our
right.
highest level. So we need to prepare, simulate these high level pressure situations so that we can grow, get stronger, because in those high pressure situations, you get those objections, you sit down with the seller, you're going to resort to that lowest level, not your highest level.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's part one of the disease of knowledge. Part two is, okay, this misunderstanding of I'm doing it, so it can't be that thing. There must be a new thing, because there's a big difference between doing and then mastering it. And so what I mean by that is this. I'll just give a really simple example so that people can really have this aha moment, hopefully. So we often talk about the importance of an agent going out there and actually generating conversations. You can call it prospecting, you can call it cold calling, you can call it whatever you want to call it. We try to help agents understand the importance that you have to be the one to go out there and initiate conversations. And oftentimes we'll get an agent to say, okay, fine, I'm bought into that. I understand I'm a salesperson. I'm understanding that I'm in the outbound sales business. Who should I call? Who should I contact? And we'll say, for sale by owners as an example. And the agent oftentimes will respond with, well, I've called for sale by owners in the past. They don't work. And so I ask them a couple of questions. I say, well, you're doing it, but have you, because they're like, oh, I'm doing this, Brandon. I'm doing this, Ben. I know you're doing it. I know you've called a for sale by owner in the past, but have you mastered calling a for sale by owners? Have you mastered the ability, the art and science of converting a for sale by owner conversation into a high level listing appointment, and then that listing appointment into a client, and that client into a closing? And they start to scratch their head. And I say, well, does your bank account prove that you've mastered it? In other words, show me all of your closings this year, the last 10 years, 5 years, however long you've been doing this, and how many for sale by owners have you converted? And if I look at that result and I remove the emotion and we step on the scale naked, so to speak, and I put that result next to an agent who is in the same exact market, selling 20, 30, 40, 50 for sale by owners per year. And I say, well, what's the disconnect? Yes, I know you've heard about prospecting for sale by owners. Yes, I believe that you've actually called some for sale by owners. Yes, I believe that you're doing it, but have you mastered it? So in other words, when an agent says, well, I've tried that thing and it doesn't work, the challenge is, does it not work? Or do you not have the skills yet to make it work? The same thing for open houses, the same thing for internet leads, the same thing with referral partners, the same thing for divorce attorneys, the same thing for any strategy ever. Most agents will consume tons of content. We just talked about that in part one. They'll hear an agent succeeding through XYZ strategy, and they'll say, oh, I've done that before. That doesn't work. Well, interesting that this agent that you're listening to on the podcast is making a couple $1 million doing the thing that you say it doesn't work. If you're doing the thing and they're doing the thing and they're getting extreme results and you're not, what's the only variable? And so that's the second part of the disease of knowledge. It's like people consume all of this content, they consume all of this information, and they dismiss some of the content for not being valuable because they've heard of it before or they've tried it before and it didn't work. You know what I mean?
100%. Maybe this is our next bullet. Maybe it's a sub bullet of this. But what I have found is that if I don't have something that's working, a lot of times I will go outside seeking approval from somebody else. Okay. So it's like, let's say, hey, for sale by owners aren't working. I go to Brandon. I'm like, hey, Brandon, man, I'm trying this for sale by owner thing and it's not working. Brandon also tried it and it didn't work. And he tells me, yeah, that doesn't work. I know a lot of people talk about it. It doesn't work. I didn't have success with it. So what I'm saying here is be really careful with who you listen to, because that is another form of knowledge, right? It's that experience. It's what that person says. And sometimes we're taking advice from somebody that has no qualification to be giving the advice, whether it doesn't work or it does, because they didn't know what to do. They didn't do it right. They didn't follow through. They didn't give it enough time. So when you ask somebody's opinion, let's really make sure that, is this person even qualified to give it? Are we asking for their opinion, or are they just unsolicited advice? Because I think what's hilarious is oftentimes people are sharing something that they have no qualification, right? I have 4 kids, and somebody was giving me advice the other day, and they don't have any kids.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that's kind of, sorry, it just popped in my head. But can you add on to that?
Well, I don't know if you're referencing that because of the post I just made on Instagram yesterday. Is that what did you see this? Is that what made you bring this up? This is the third part of the disease of knowledge. It's so funny you bring this up. Here's what I said. I said, am I going crazy, or have you ever noticed that people who don't make a lot of money are always the one giving advice to others about how to make a lot of money? Or that people who are unhealthy and people who are unhealthy are full of health and fitness advice? Or that people without kids tell people with kids how to be a parent? Or that people who have never owned a business tell everybody else how to run their business? Or that people without a pot to piss in tell those what to do with their money? Or that people who bring up political drama couldn't name one policy for either side that they support?
That's so good.
That's what I put on
we
Instagram.
Must spend a little bit of time together. We're in lockstep. That's great.
And it's just so true. Like, that's the third part of the disease of knowledge, and how that shows up in the business of real estate sales. Unfortunately, some people might not like this, but it's the truth. You think about whose hands are new agents in for the most part, and it's these broker managers who, listen, there are some great ones, but the vast majority of them are in that position on a $45,000 salary because they couldn't succeed in the sales side of the business, so they went the avenue of management. And they're the ones corralling most of these new agents as they come into the business, They're spending the most time with them. They're having the most conversations with them. And so it's a huge issue. To your point, the only advice they're getting for their first couple of months is this person who themselves have never succeeded in real estate sales saying, oh, that doesn't work or that doesn't work. What do you mean that doesn't work? How do you know? How do you know that doesn't work? Now, the new agent doesn't know. The new agent takes that as gospel. The new agent just has blind faith. Well, if broker Bob, I mean, I love Bob. He's the one that got me into the business. He recruited me into the business. I'm going to take his word for it. Where Bob's like, work your sphere of influence, little Johnny. Well, what does that mean, Bob? I don't know, but maybe do some social media too. Okay, great. Can you show me how? You know what I mean? Like, that's the advice they're getting.
It's all conceptual. Like,
yeah,
but there's
theory.
no like
it's all theory.
By step theory.
It's all theory. Yep.
And so, it's funny, whatever industry you get in, how common that is.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that the people that are oftentimes the loudest are the ones without the results to back it up. You know, it's always the drama king or the drama queen at these real estate brokerages, the loudmouths at the water cooler talking all the, just creating drama. And they're often on the lowest, they're the low guy on the totem pole. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, why are you listening to him? He's the lowest guy in the depth chart. And the top producer doesn't say a word to nobody. You know what I mean? They're like enemy number one oftentimes. Yeah. It's like, well, do what she's doing. You know what I mean? Don't listen to Johnny at the water cooler. Just go look at the whiteboard. Who's on top of that thing? Why are you listening to Johnny? Johnny hasn't sold a house in the last 4 months. Yet, because they're the loudest, they're the most insecure. Anyway, we're going down a path of, but it's the part 3 of this disease of knowledge. It's like, who are you listening to?
So good.
Now, so we've talked about part 1, which is this bad habit of content consumption versus content creation versus executing on the information. So takeaway number 1, Ben, would be, okay, what we always tell an agent, it's like, I'm going to teach you one thing at a time. And you're going to go do that one thing until you've demonstrated to me that you can actually execute on the thing, because it's not what you teach, it's what you emphasize. And then once you've demonstrated to me that you can do the thing, then I'll give you another little hit of dopamine. I'll teach you another new little sexy tactical thing. And then go do that thing, right? So we control that in our side. We can't control that in the world, right? But people are just, feed me more content, more podcasts, more. And they're not doing anything. So we talked about that. We talked about part 2, which is like trying something versus mastering something. We talked about raising people's awareness around like, okay, you can't be inconsistent with something and then say it didn't work. You can't do 2 open houses and then deem open houses don't work. You can't do Google pay-per-click for 60 days and tell me it doesn't work. You can't prospect for, inconsistently here or there for 2 or 3 months and say, that doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't work. We talked about that. And then part 3, we talked about being very, very focused and leery about what voices you're listening to, and how important it is to say, okay, is who am I going to listen to? Who am I going to act on? And being aware that most of the people that are the loudest are the ones that don't have the results to back it up. And so now that people have this awareness, it's hopefully they can recognize their behavior and take some action, because that's the thing I'll leave people with is information. And everybody knows this, like information without any implementation has literally no value. It just doesn't have any value. I know people in my life right now that have like multiple degrees, you know what I mean, from like college. So like on paper, you're like, oh, wow, this person's set up for ultras, and this person is broke, filed bankruptcy. And it's like, well, how? I mean, this guy's operating with so much information, and I'll give one more analogy. And I'll get your last thoughts. The best way to sum up this disease of knowledge that I've ever seen is when you look at doctors. You can make the argument that these people that are physicians, regardless of focus, know more about the human body, know more about biology, know more about health than maybe any other person on the planet. Yet there's study after study after study after study that says this is the most unhealthy profession in the world. That more doctors have heart disease, that they're overweight, unhealthy, yet they're operating with the most amount of information. If that is not evidence enough that information has no value unless acted upon, I don't know what else will. How can the people that know the most about health and fitness be at the same point in time the most unhealthy and unfit people on the planet? And so that just, I say that, Ben, because these real estate agents that are getting into the business, there's so much there's so many shiny things that are trying to get their attention. And it's like, less is more. You don't need all this information. I made a video, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I said the dumbest agents are the ones that make the most money. And if anybody watched that video was everything to do with agents like focusing on one thing, and they don't know about all the other things. Versus like if you brought up like these sexy marketing things, you're like, I never heard about that before. And you're like, what are you, dumb? No, I just know about this one thing that I'm doing. I'm making $700,000 a year. I just don't have the need to go learn about all this other stuff. Versus the smartest agent, and I tell you about these people all the time, where these agents know everything about every new CRM. They're at every single event. You see them traveling all over the country, loud as hell on social media. They know about this marketing thing and that marketing. You're like, wow, this guy's a genius. Yet they're getting advances on their commissions. They're dead broke. And so it's just another analogy that oftentimes these agents that everyone thinks so smart, they're just addicted to information. They're building a graveyard of online courses. They buy every single course known to man, and they don't do anything. You know what I mean? They're broke. And so,
professional.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Any other closing thoughts that you have on this?
As you consume knowledge, I forget where I heard this, but it's something I put into practice on every new thing that I apply, right? It's like, how long do I need to do this one thing where it would be completely ridiculous for me not to have success with it?
It's great.
So forget the knowledge, forget the stats, whatever somebody tells you. How long should I do this where it would just be absolutely ridiculous for me not to be a professional at it?
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's cold calls, whatever. Man, how many for sale by owners do I need to talk to where it would just be absolutely absurd for me not to figure this out? And just do that one at a time. Add those on.
Yeah, I'll give one tactical thing too. I used to like crush books, like a lot of them, and it has definitely helped. But now what I do is I kind of hang out with the same book over and over again, and I don't really veer away from the couple that you and I kind of just focus on, and it's been so much better. Like going through a deeper level of understanding and executing on all the things in book X versus reading 100 different books and executing nothing. You know what I mean? I made this, I'm a victim of it as well. You know what I mean? And like, I would just crush all the information and it was tucked in my head. And so I had it all, you know what I mean? But it's like, okay, when I looked at how much I was executing on all the information, all the time I was spending going through all these books, it's nothing that compares to what I do now, where it's like, I'm going through the same book 10, 20, 30. I'm not going away from it until I've, soaked all the things out of that thing. And I'm doing all the stuff in that thing. It makes no sense to keep getting more and more information when you haven't done anything about the information you already went through.
That's right.
We call it mental masturbation.
That's right. Yeah, I think first, right? If you just got into this industry, sure, cast a really wide net. Find your people, find your lane, but then once you're there, lock in.
Stick.
And that's what you're doing. You're casting a really wide net. I'm going to read a bunch of books. I'm going to figure out what I like, what I don't like. And now I've got some familiarity with where I want to be. And then I'm just going to sink my teeth into that and I'm going to master it. Before I consume anything else, I'm not taking in anything except this one thing.